Hi you guys, this is Rachel Kirkland here, the Modern Shaman. Thanks for being with me for another YouTube video of the week. If you're new to the channel, I'm glad you're here. And I want to invite you to go to my website, themodernshaman.net. And I just encourage you to kind of peek around, like play on the website, see what things do, look at all the drop-down menu options and the various teaching modules that I have on there. So many of these questions that you all ask, I give tidbits of information, but I'm not able to go into the depth of teaching that I offer on my online teaching workshops. And those are downloadable in video module form now. I had that on my heart to create those modules last year right before COVID started, and it's the perfect time frame to take advantage of it when so many of us are working from home or kind of have a base that's a little bit more sedentary and in one place right now. So I hope this is beneficial to you, and if you want more, go to the website. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, so I'm going to just read the question of the week and then open up to some answers. And here it is. This one came in from a viewer and it said, "Hi, Miss Rachel. I really love your work. Please make a video on how it feels to be going through a trance or feeling the presence of the spirits while channeling during a session. Is it painful? Just curious." So I love this. I don't think I've had a question about channeling ever. I don't know that anyone has ever sent this in, so it's about time. I'm glad you sent in your question. And I feel like there should be a preface before I dive into the heart of your question, which is the feeling tone of it, about some of the language that you used, because within this community, really in a lot of different communities, a lot of different work spaces and kind of specific areas of study, we have our own language, right? We have our vocabulary that we know, or those that are just learning about it kind of come in and they hear that language thrown around, and a lot of times we don't take the time to step back and really define or explain the concepts behind the words that we use. So I feel like that needs to be done first. All right, so the first thing that I want to define is trance channeling. Now, you mentioned both of those terms, but you mentioned them in different sentences, like not back to back. And so I want to kind of refine the question a little bit and pull out some of the specifics to define those, to give a little bit more clarity to what we're talking about here. So trance channeling is a specific type of channeling where the person or the human that is inviting in a spiritual dialogue with a high dimensional or higher vibrational being, be it an angel, a celestial being, whether it is a cosmic being, another planetary being, a collective of energy, meaning not one singular being, but a collective that are housed in one energetic form, and to speak for that form. So when that human is inviting in an energy and they take the backseat, the background, and they let that energy or entity take the dominant foreground of their form and their speech, then that is considered trance channeling. The language of the person changes, the human changes, the speech, the dialogue, the patterning, the tone, the vocal expression. Oftentimes their eyes are closed, sometimes their eyes roll back into their head, sometimes they are asleep or they are laying down to completely relax the form and invite in and let that entity or that spirit take the foreground of the consciousness. And then your own spirit, as the human that's participatory in this interaction, takes the background and becomes more open in a submissive energy to be less dominant. All right, and so as everything's flowing through, it's as if you have moved your consciousness into most of the subconscious areas of the being, which is still present. This is not possession, all right? Don't be confused by that, and those words are not interchangeable, trance channeling and possession, all right? Because the person involved is voluntarily moving their consciousness into the background so that another entity or high vibrational being may come in and use their vocal cords, their physical body, to take the dominant form of expression. And this is called trance channeling. Typically, these people do not remember what they speak because they're not using their own cognition to come up with the words. They're using the form, but again, the mental capacity is present, is useful in just the neurology of what it means to be human. So that you have a brain, they're using the use of your vocabulary. However, the sense of processing it or metacognition of knowing what you're saying, this is moved into the background and, like I said, becomes more subconscious in your awareness. So oftentimes when people are trance channeling, they don't remember what they've said. And sometimes they'll need a translator, or sometimes they'll need someone to ask them questions. Now, possession has a component to it that is without permission, that is non-voluntary, and can cause like hurt and harm and danger to the physical form, can be abrasive to the physical form, or other physical forms. And so there's a level of dominance there that is not aware. And so that's a very different than trance channeling, okay? Now, mediumship or clairaudience is also very different. This is where it's more a dialogue of the spirit or the entity that you're speaking to, and you're using your psychic sense of clairaudience to have a dialogue between an entity or energy that is non-physical. This may be a past loved one, ancestor, an angelic being, a cosmic being, or a collective. But there is a sense of the entirety of your soul and your consciousness still being present in that dialogue, utilizing your own sense of humanity, your own soul, your own expression to dialogue between, almost like talking on the phone to this entity or this individual, and transferring back and forth as an intermediary for someone else, or if someone's asking you questions, or you're sitting with the loved one of someone who is passed, and you become a sort of bridge and information base of sharing what you're hearing from one side or the other, utilizing your clairaudience. So that is different because you're still the dominant form of consciousness. Now, I will say there is another form of channeling that I use that we are familiar with in the shamanic community, which is called energy melding. And this is my preferred method of channeling. And it kind of combines the two, but there's more awareness and consciousness in utilizing your spirit, your form, bringing another forward and melding energies into the form. So there's not one that's more dominant than the other. They oscillate back and forth, and you have the ability to navigate with a sense of conscious control of how much you come out and speak during the channeling and how much the other entity or energy speaks during the channeling. Now, this takes a high level of skill and practice. I do teach this in some of my higher level mastery classes, but it takes time because it utilizes all of the psychic senses, your clairaudience, your clairsentience for those empathic and the feeling of the experience, your clairvoyant visionary. So you begin to actually take on all of the psychic senses, and in that energy meld, you begin to speak as they speak, feel as they feel, see as they see, hear as they hear, and communicate as they communicate. But all the while, you have still a dominant sense of awareness of what you're speaking that is them and their feelings, and what is yours. And so it's more, like I said, oscillating or kind of navigating this fine line like water, of moving the spirit in a melded form of communication. So there are many different ways when you get into channeling that you can learn navigational tools that make you feel comfortable in how much you want to give over a space to the spirit speaking through you and how much you want to retain your own sense of self. Okay, I realize we're probably like 10 minutes into this video now, but I want to dive into your question. So the last part of your question, is it painful? It's not painful unless you are clairsentient and your energy melded, and the experience that the entity or the soul that you are channeling is experiencing pain, because it will mimic in the body and you will share that experience. So unless you are doing a channeling session that involves maybe a past life death scene, an experience of trauma from an earlier in their life or something like this, and you are connected with that soul and then they experience trauma, then you may feel the experience of that trauma. But is it painful to bring in a spirit? No, absolutely not. Because it's not like it's stretching itself trying to get into your form like some sort of rubber suit. Remember, when you look at our body, there is actually no sense of hard surface that separates you from everything else. We are moving and we are free-flowing form. The molecules themselves look like there's a sense of separation, right? Between like where my arm is and where the sky around me or the space around me is. But the closer and closer you get to seeing those molecules and particles, there's so much space in between. It's just like, it's all space. We're floating around in space. So there's no sense of difficulty to fit into the form. You may experience that when you're not used to bringing in a level of intelligence that's high vibrational in essence. And this is just energetic, like energetic downloads. Plenty of people get this just from bringing in elements that their body is not used to or doesn't have harmony with yet. And I like to compare this to like when people have allergies, when they move into a new area and your physical form begins to have an allergic reaction to the trees in the area, to something the air is carrying. Because it's new to your form, it has to find harmony with it. And there are processes that we can put those types of trees or whatever it is that our body is creating an allergic reaction to, like a bit of microdosing the cedar plant or getting that plant that you're allergic to into your body in ways that are harmonious, right? This is the same process that like a vaccine comes from. It's the thought process of having something into your body or in your body in a way that your body is able to balance itself and find harmony with it instead of combating it like a foreign enemy. So when energy comes in and your body is not used to it, at some points it can create a headache, it can create a sense of pressure, it can create heat flashes, rashes through toxins, just like a detox would create, right? You can have physical expressions during this harmonization process. But it doesn't hurt in the way of like, okay, it's coming in, it's going to stretch my body into this huge shape for this entity to come through. You will feel it if you're clairsentient. Now remember, clairsentience is the psychic sense of feeling non-physical energy through the sensations of the body. So this is also inclusive of empathic energy, emotional energy, feeling the emotional impact of the entity or the energy that you're receiving. So oftentimes, if you're highly clairsentient, then you experience more of the physical responsiveness of the body to bringing in an entity to channel and connect with. Okay, I'm going to go into really the first part of your question because I kind of answered them backwards. And that is, how do you know when spirit is coming forward and feeling the presence of spirits that are coming in? What does that feel like? Just kind of the sensational aspect of it. And this will be different for every person. So don't listen to what I say and go, oh, well, it's not real for me because I don't feel it like Rachel feels it. Nope, not the case. The whole point about being aware of your own connections and abilities is to notice how spirit is already speaking to you. Notice how you recognize energy and how they show up and come to your front door, and how you identify the differentials between different vibrations, different energetic forms, and so on and so forth. So I'll explain what it feels like to me, but it may feel very different to you. And don't negate that, all right? Don't negate your own intelligence with what is coming forward to you, and honoring your intuitive awareness with it. Like if you feel like, oh, this is what spirit guides feel like to me, this is what angels feel like to me, this is what cosmic beings feel like to me. They have different variances in vibration, and they will interact with your own soul in a way for you to recognize that interaction. And I want to encourage you to do that first and foremost, okay? And don't, again, negate your own highly intelligent and intuitive awareness beyond what I'm sharing. Okay, but I will say, when an entity comes forward, the first thing that I'm aware of is that an energy is present. Just as a sense of awareness, I'm aware that energy is present right now. As I'm making this video, it's on the topic of it. But I have many ancestors and loved ones that help me all the time. My guides are always with me. There's a sense of ancestry and lineage that's very present in my bloodline, and they stay very close. I'm always aware of their presence. And that awareness feels more like an overall fade type of energy to me. Like as if you would take a volume knob and you would turn down the volume really low on some classical music. It's a background energy or frequency that I am always aware of, just in my own sensory awareness. Many children have the same awareness when they'll say, I feel like someone's here. I feel like something's here. I feel like so-and-so. And it's a general vibe or an awareness of energy that is not your own. That is someone else's. That's how they typically show up for me first. Now, I have a lot of psychic guidelines and boundaries just because I do this for a living and am constantly interacting with spirits. And so I have a process to it. So this may be different for me. When I was younger, I didn't have any sort of organizational flow. And so they just kind of came in and bothered and wanted to talk, and they would kind of pull at me, pull at your shirt like a kindergartner would when they want to say something. And they're like, hey, hey, hey. Then I learned some organizational flow. And so now I have spaces, dimensional spaces or portals that are created around my household to hold spirits as a little bit of a waiting room. I have a video on that. Somebody asked about dimensional constructs, and I can't remember what the video is titled, but if you want to look back at some of my videos, if you're interested in that, how to create portals or dimensional constructs to house entities or energies to wait for you to call them in. So this is what I do when they come in. I call them in by name. I have one of my psychic boundaries is that I don't let any spirit meld with my energy without my formal permission of calling them in by name. So again, I do this for a living, and so I have to have a sense of peace to my life. I have children in my household. I have different people that I want to interact with, and when you don't have a sense of organizational flow and you're interacting with that many spirits all the time, it can feel very overwhelming, chaotic, and make you feel crazy. So when I invite them in, typically for me it feels very warm and soothing, as if there's a bath on the inside of my body. And it creates a heat in my internal structure that makes my muscles relax. And this is also a confirmation that I've created with spirit of a high vibrational being. That this is a being that is in harmony, is already in a peaceful frequency of love. It doesn't feel harsh, it doesn't feel abrasive, because I know that the entity that I'm inviting in is one of high, loving, and light-based energy form. So as I let them in, I soften my body, and it doesn't hurt. at all, like you asked, it actually feels very relaxing to me, very zenned out. Like it's that space in between falling asleep. It's theta brainwaves, between falling asleep and waking. And so it's very meditative, trance-like, and relaxing for the physical body and for me. And I love it. I could stay in. I love it. I mean, it feels like a warm bath, like I said, from the inside out. And it is very, very peace-inducing. Now, depending on how much of my consciousness is retained in the channeling session, like I shared earlier, I prefer to do energy melding channeling so that I have control over how much of my consciousness is present, and I can move it to the foreground when I can tell that a client is having difficulty understanding the language of the spirit that I'm channeling for them. And this often happens in session when a very, very high vibrational being is coming in. A lot of times there's not a lot of words. It's like the intelligence level is so refined, and the profundity with which they're speaking is beyond language. And so there's so much coming in energetically that the words feel like they fall short of the energy that they carry. And so oftentimes it's useful as a channeling session to be energy melded and retain a bit of my persona to be able to say this wording, and the way that they are sharing this message with you has profound impact in your life, because I can feel the weight and density with which they're sharing this information. And so I can communicate that alongside the message and oscillate in between the two. Now that again is energy melding more so than trance channeling. When the trance channeling comes in, this takes a high level of trust and accuracy with the vibrations that you're letting in. And this, like I said, is way more subconscious. And so oftentimes people experience this like sleep, like meditation, like a very deep level of hypnosis. So the form itself is completely relaxed and absolutely not in pain. So it's a beautiful, harmonious process. It's something that I would encourage you to train in, to gain an absolute level of trust and to create a sense of psychic boundaries with where you feel like you have a level of comfort and control in your interaction with your non-physical entities or energies that you're communicating with. Blessings. See you guys next week.